Turn them off. When you're not speaking, please turn them off because
When it's red, it's on.
yeah, and then when you're not, okay, I'll let you know.
Red is on.
Red is on.
Good afternoon. My name is Christella Palmanka. I'm from My Foundation. I'm the moderator of this session. With me are Madame Emanuela Doran Kofi from Green Hedge International, Mr. Rash, from a CEO of Green Earth Agro, and then Mr. Rahman from Climate Innovative Center, Ghana. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
We'll start with Madame Emanuela. As a negotiator for Ghana on finance, how's it going?
Well, I've been getting this question for the past few days, and it's such a battle and a mess in the negotiation room, especially on NCQG. So I follow the NCQG. I follow the long-term finance and also the complementarity between Article 2.1c and Article 9 of the Paris Agreement. And we all know that this COP is the Climate Finance COP, but it's rather unfortunate that we don't feel that in the negotiation rooms, because I think there is a deliberate attempt for us not to have a decision test on the NCQG this year because of the kind of, inputs and the kind of views that developed country parties have been having. For example, on the NCQG for developing countries, so being represented by the G77 plus China, our main focus is really on discussing access to climate finance, also discussing transparency, of the financial mechanisms that we currently have globally, and also really to discuss what are the enablers and the disenablers of climate finance. And these are, money matters, these are hard conversations to have because those who are supposed to provide the climate finance do not want to provide it. And then we as developing countries really recognize the need to have finance because we have so many solutions. We have young people all over this place carrying out very innovative solutions, but without climate finance, nothing can be achieved. So me being a negotiator for Ghana, which is a developing country, we are really pushing in the negotiation room to come up with a text on the NCQG that is favorable for us. The current text that we have is not an agreeable text. And so when it went to the ministerial session, it was referred back to us to further continue with the negotiations because there were still controversial issues, especially on the long-term finance. Yesterday we had a session, and the whole discussion was about the OECD report on the fact that the goal, the $100 billion goal, was met in 2022. Currently, we don't have a common accounting mechanism or system on how to even assess the $100 billion goal. And so who, or based on what, did OECD and then the others come up with the data that the goal was met in 2022? Also, developed country parties do not want to include in the test that, the $100 billion goal was not met in the previous years. They just want a text that the $100 billion goal was only met in 2022, which is not favorable for us because there should be that kind of, agreement and then recognition that we failed, or developed country parties have failed to provide us with that climate finance. And so it's really a battle room. Sometimes we finish 11 p.m. This week, we know we are going to go into negotiations all the way until morning, but we are really holding the fort and to really ensure that we don't leave the room without favorable decision tests for developing country parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is about the negotiators and how they are going about the finance. Let's go to my gentleman here from Ghana. I want to know about Green Earth Agro, how you're doing it, how you're financing it, and the way forward for your organization.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rushank. I am CEO of Green Earth Agro. Before I say something about myself, I would want to thank Madam Emanuela to fight for the policy making, which is very important. I'll give you the ground reality of what actually happens. So we do regenerative agriculture in Ghana, and I have been coming to COP for a while. I hear all the time, but there are no facilities which can be used on the ground. I have put in all my own money to reach where we have to reach. We have around 1,500 acres of land and around 100 people in the team who work. Previous to this, I used to be a banker from Luxembourg, so I say one thing: if a banker like me who's had previous experience, plus I have access to all the policymakers, if I can't raise money, I don't know who can raise money. So this is something I wanted to say, that there is a huge gap between what we need and what is coming. So just to give you a little bit of reference, around 30% approximately emissions are linked to food system, but less than 5% of climate finance goes towards agriculture. And with hungry people, there is no ways we can fight climate action. We need to ensure that everyone has food on the table, and agriculture can really be that Philippe on how we can get things done in a correct way. So my call to action is, let's create a policy which is then implemented on the ground, and farmers, who are the real backbone of our ecosystem, get access. Let's not remove our focus that the current need is to grow food, because as per different UN organizations, close to 1 billion people are hungry. But there is really no access to finance. I have got some finance, but at interest of over 30%. It is not the finance we need, right? So this is my call to action. We can change people's life. Farmers in rural Ghana are quite equipped with regenerative techniques. They know what to do with their land, but they need to have access to finance. That's what I would want to emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rush. Okay, moving on to Mr. Dramani Bukari, the one who knows how to access finance. Let us hear from you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So a couple of things. So number one, we need to be very clear in our minds that small and growing businesses like Raj's own do have a pivotal role to play in the fight against climate change. And they do have that role because, number one, they act as catalysts for innovative solutions. Number two, they are the drivers of sustainable economic growth. Number three, they are enablers of adaptation and resilience in the developing world. And number four, they remain the promoters of circular economy. So quite clearly, all of this are critical to a successful fight against the global climate emergency. Now, they cannot, under the current circumstances of very high cost of capital, achieve that. And they cannot achieve that with the current financial structure, global financial structure. What they need is concessional funding to be able to do so. What they need is grants to be able to do so. Unfortunately, the climate finance flows that we are currently seeing, a significant proportion of it are loans. Only a small portion of it, just around 4%, are grants. We cannot have a system like that and expect a significant proportion of those that can contribute to climate change fight succeed in doing so. In any case, if you take the developing world, or even if you take the economic infrastructure across the globe, small and growing businesses contribute significantly to gross domestic product. If you take Ghana, for instance, 92% of all businesses are small and growing businesses. 70% of the GDP is contributed by small and growing businesses. And quite clearly, that highlights the significant or integral position that they are when it comes to succeeding in the area of climate change. And we need to put the focus on them. Unfortunately, in the discussions that go on in the previous COPs and on this, in this particular COP, the issues of small and growing businesses, whether in the global south, but particularly in the global north, are not highlighted enough. I am from the Ghana Climate Innovation Center at Chelsea University. What we do is support small and growing businesses that are responding to climate adaptation and mitigation in order that they can provide the solutions for local adaptation and resilience. Now, to be able to do so successfully, they need the right kind of funding, they need the right kind of capacity building, they need the right kind of coaching and mentorship, but they also need to ensure that the right policy environment is created in order that they can succeed. So, to conclude, what I will say is that let's ensure that eventually when the NCGQ is negotiated, the funding that is coming up is one that creates the needed fiscal space in developing economies, is not one that burdens them in terms of debt, so that they can become innovative enough to ensure that they leverage the power of fiscal policy to support small and growing businesses in these developing areas to be able to ensure that actually they lead the climate fight and show the mettle that these small and growing businesses do have in them. The way that they are doing this is practical implementation, of practical solutions. And we all, particularly in the global south, we realize that agriculture still constitutes a significant proportion of our well-being in terms of GDP, correct? They are innovating solutions around precision agriculture. They are innovating solutions around conservation agriculture. They are innovating solutions around several other areas within the food systems value chain that are ensuring that methane levels are reduced, that are ensuring that deforestation is reversed, that are ensuring that the global ecosystem and biodiversity is restored. And for me, they have a very pivotal role that they play, for which reason the global architecture fighting the climate crisis should focus their lens on supporting small and growing businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Manuela. How are you going to ensure, being part of the negotiators, that in the end we don't agree to just loans but grants, so that the interest rates on it will not be too much for the ordinary Ghanaian? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, listening to my colleague speakers, it's very inspiring what you're doing. I myself am also a project manager in one of the projects that I'm carrying out currently. So when I'm in the negotiation room, because of my grassroots work, you have that kind of understanding what is going on the ground, and not just, discussing things in abstract. And so for us, I keep saying Ghana is part of the African group of negotiators. We are also a member of the G77 plus China, and all of these, every country is a member of a negotiating bloc. And so what's the interest of the negotiating bloc is, that is what we advocate for. And for Africa currently in the negotiation rooms on finance, we are really stressing on the fact that there is a huge gap between adaptation finance and mitigation finance, because developed country parties see that kind of investment opportunities in mitigation projects rather than adaptation projects, because for them, they are not going to get money. If you look at the statistics, you would realize that when it comes to renewable energy, guess who are the top 2 investors in renewable energy? The USA and China. Why? Because they see an investment opportunity, they see a business opportunity in the whole system, and that is where the problem is. Because for Africa and for small island states and for other developing countries, our major challenge is adapting to the climate crisis. That is really what is affecting us, and that is our major push in the negotiation rooms, increasing adaptation finance. And adaptation finance is not going to be loans, it's not going to be equity, it is mainly grants. Because with adaptation, you're not always going to get, investment returns out of it. And if you look at the obligations of developed country parties under Article 9 of the Paris Agreement and also Article 2.1c, they are supposed to take the lead in providing climate finance. They are supposed to provide the finance without any conditionalities. And so really, that is what we are pushing. It seems sometimes that they forget what the obligations are. And so we are reminding them that this is your obligation. You are obligated to do this because you have historically polluted. Your economies have benefited from fossil fuels. Now, we as African countries are being told not to drill oil. But how do we do that? Other economies have depended on fossil fuel and have built their economies. And we just discovered oil in Ghana, and how do you come to tell us that, we should watch our economies dwindle because of a just energy transition and the fact that, we want to go renewable? And so if we really want us to mitigate or leave the fossil fuel in the ground, then developed country parties must really ensure that they are providing finance to us. That is the only way. That is equitable. That is the only way that we can develop our economies without depending on fossil fuel. How do you go tell Nigeria, whose GDP is mainly dependent on fossil fuel, to stop drilling? And you're not providing them with climate finance to adapt to climate change and also to build the economies. That is not going to work. And so that is really what we do in the negotiation rooms, really pushing these developed country parties to ensure that, they adhere to their obligations under the Paris Agreement and UNFCCC. But we see all of the global politics trying to stall the whole negotiations. Sometimes they push negotiations into late in the evening, watching us to go home so that some decisions will be made. But for those of us negotiating, we are holding the fort to make sure that we don't sleep until we really get a decision test on the NCQG that is favorable to us. And so for any African or developing country party here, you can be rest assured that we are really fighting for all of us. Because at the end of the day, the climate crisis does not impact a certain group of people. We are all vulnerable, and we are here representing millions of people back home who don't have the opportunity to be here. But they are counting on all of us to really make our voices heard at this conference of parties and to go back home and tell them that when we came here, we negotiated on the NCQG and were able to make progress, and this is what we bring to you from Baku. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful work you are doing. We'll go back to my two panelists. So I want to hear your last words to the finance team for COP29, what your dream is or what you want to see at the end of COP29.
I would only say one thing: whatever the policies are made, there has to be implementation on the ground as well. Great work in doing the policy making, but it is extremely important that practical solutions are given on the ground. I have tried to access grants on the ground, and sometimes grants are of the size of $5,000. $5,000, what do I do? There's nothing we can do with $5,000, $10,000. There is a lot of focus on capacity building. But what do we do with capacity building if we do not have finances to follow up? You teach me how to let's say, make a sweater, but if you don't give me a wool and a needle, what is the point of doing that kind of a capacity building? So the practical solutions are very important. We need to think bottom up. There is a lot of top-down approach on how we think we can change the finance. We should listen to people on the ground, see what is needed, come with practical solutions. Do not only train people without giving them money to actually execute those plans. So it is very, very, very important. Bottom-up practical solutions are implemented on the ground. The only thing my last 8 years in Ghana have taught me, that if you empower the people on the ground, the changes happen way faster. Hungry people cannot save world. We need to create jobs, we need to create food, we need to create housing, we need to give all the basic amenities. We need to have electricity which is at a reasonable price. I see a lot of people investing in renewable energy, but the cost of electricity where we do is extremely high. Nothing is subsidized. There is things which have to make practical sense. There has to be electricity, internet, roads, access to transportation, public health care. All this needs to come for small businesses and local people to grow, and they have the power to take us to the next level. So my only call is, let's make strong policies for countries which are developing, and those policies need to be implemented with precision and with practicality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rash. Over to you, Mr. Ramani Bukari. We want to know what your plans are and what you want to see at the end of COP29 in the terms of financing.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that the conversation around bridging the gap between adaptation and mitigation finance cannot be overemphasized. And I'd like to really thank my colleague for echoing this and for paying attention to it in the negotiating room, because it is only when that gap is bridged and funding is aligned towards adaptation that they directly target the challenges that vulnerable countries in the global south are facing. Otherwise, it's just funding fueled by capitalism and profiteerism, and that does not seem to resolve the challenges of the global south. Number two, I wanted to emphasize one other point which had to do with the fact that, look, if we want to also address the challenges that the global South faces, or developing or emerging countries faces relative to climate change, then at the end of this COP, I also want to see strong commitment to the loss and damage fund, to the extent that it is well capitalized and effectively operationalized. Number three, we should pay attention to the fact that small and growing businesses have a role to play. Enterprise support organizations that are supporting them to play this role are one entity that also needs their voices held in this conversation, so that the kind of support provided to those small and growing businesses are structured effectively to an extent that they can help resolve the climate crisis in a holistic manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So at the end of COP29, we hope to see that the finance that we get for developing countries are able, people at the grassroots are able to assess it and also use it and use it well. Over to you, Manuela, for your last words, then we end.
These words of hope, sometimes the battle is difficult, sometimes it's challenging for all of us. And I see a lot of young people in this room, and my last words will be words of hope, that despite the fact that our fight may seem minimal, no matter where you are, you think you're in a village somewhere implementing the minutest of projects, but just know that you're contributing to a very big conversation. You're contributing to, we achieving not exceeding 1.5 degrees. You're helping communities to build resilience. And so despite the challenges, despite the fact that access to climate finance is difficult, despite the fact that, we are struggling in all aspects, I want to encourage you and give you hope that situations would not always be the same. A time would come, we will change that narrative, and we're still changing that narrative. So let's hold the fort, let's be encouraging to each other, and let's support and represent the voices of the people that we left home. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, any question from the audience?
I wanted to find out, African are asking for 1.3 or 1.6 trillion. civil society is asking for about 3 trillion. And the negotiation, can you give it emphatic? What is the position? Thank you.
Okay, so currently, as I told you, it's a lot of struggles. There are so many brackets in the current NCQG test, which the quantum is one of them. We see in the text, we have the 1.3 trillion, we still have the 100 billion in there, we still have like 2 trillion. But for us as developing countries, what we are pushing really is whatever quantum that we decide on, it must be equivalent to the cost of achieving our NDCs. Because really that is the target. We had the global stock taste. We knew what is at stake. We already know what is at stake. Countries have already submitted their NDCs. Other countries are submitting their NDC 3.0. And so we cannot say 100 billion when overall NDCs of all developing country parties is like 3 trillion or 4 trillion. So really that is our goal. The finance must commensurate with the cost of achieving our NDCs. So that is what we are pushing on. But we've not decided on the quantum yet. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope your question has been answered. Over to Mr. Rash for a last one.
I also wanted to highlight one more thing coming from the private sector, that is also responsibility of the private sector to invest money into climate finance. We need to package a product in a way that working towards climate action is profitable investments, which will increase the pool of money which comes towards sectors like agriculture, sustainable mining, and forestation. So there has to be a little bit of focus on how the governments incentivize private sector to also invest in climate action. That's all I wanted to call for from the private sector, that it is a good way to invest in a profitable future as well.
Thank you. Mr. Bukari, private sector, how do you invest in climate finance?
Well, if you ask me, the private sector is always minded by their bottom line, and so quite clearly, it just then tells you that at the grassroots, bankable projects should be developed. And I know, because I work in the sector, that there are too many bankable projects that are chasing after funding, except that the kinds of fund that we do have in the global north are just not appropriate for those funding, because interest rates or cost of capital is just too high. And so with concessional funding, I believe that those kinds of projects are projects that will see the light of day, and then not just contribute to people's livelihoods and well-being, and not just contribute to sustainable economic growth, but also contribute to fighting the global climate crisis. For me, which is why all of us are gathered here, and at the end of the day, we want to see stronger, improved access to funding. And like she rightly mentioned, it's quite clear that the only way that that kind of funding will be at a threshold that is meaningful is when it is tied to the global cost of the NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We hope that at the end of COP29, we'll all come together and see that the climate finance team have been able to achieve the aims that they set, so that we in developing countries can see the benefit. Thank you.
Charlie, we know the text. Yeah, sure. We stand there.
So this is
Yeah.
she's the judge.
If you give them to Camilla, she'll do it.
She will sit here.
Do you want them to sit in any particular?